The unexpected encounter. Ethan adjusted his equipment as the twin suns of Zalora III dipped lower into the horizon, casting a golden glow across the alien forest. He had been stationed on this remote planet for 6 months, studying the unique flora and fauna for a prestigious research institute on Earth. Despite his scientific focus, he often found himself captivated by the local inhabitants, a race of intelligent beings known as the Lyrelians. They were humanoid in shape but bore features that were undeniably alien. Pale blue skin, large, luminous eyes, and a calm, almost childlike demeanor. It was during one of his regular field studies that he encountered Lyra. She approached him silently, her footsteps as light as whispers against the soft ground. Ethan, engrossed in cataloging the behavior of a small, glowing insect, didn't notice her until she was standing just a few feet away. "Human Ethan," she said, her melodic voice startling him. "May I ask you a question?" Ethan turned abruptly, nearly dropping his tablet. Standing before him was Lyra, a young Lyrelian female who often lingered near the research outpost, observing the humans with a curiosity that bordered on fascination. "Lyra," Ethan said, catching his breath, "you almost gave me a heart attack." "Heart attack?" Lyra tilted her head, her silver hair shimmering in the fading light. "Is your heart malfunctioning? Shall I call for assistance?" Ethan chuckled nervously, shaking his head. No, it's just an expression. It means you surprised me." "Ah," Lyra said, her wide eyes blinking slowly. "Surprise. Fascinating." She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him with unnerving intensity. Ethan felt a prickle of unease, but tried to maintain a friendly demeanor. The Lyrelians were peaceful and exceptionally intelligent, but their lack of understanding about human customs often led to awkward interactions. "What's your question?" Ethan asked, setting his tablet down and leaning against a nearby tree. Lyra hesitated for a moment, her fingers twitching slightly, an indicator of nervousness in her species. "I have been observing you," she said finally. "Your movements, your reactions, your body." Ethan's brow furrowed. "My body?" "Yes," Lyra said, nodding earnestly. "It is very different from ours. Your kind seems so adaptable, strong. I wish to understand it better." Ethan felt his cheeks grow warm. He wasn't sure how to respond to such a direct statement. "Well, humans and Lyrelians are biologically quite different. That's why we're here, to learn about each other." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "But there is one thing I do not understand." Her gaze dropped briefly to his lower body, and Ethan felt a wave of discomfort. "Why?" she asked. "Does your breeding tool grow and change size?" Ethan froze, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. "Excuse me," he stammered. "Your breeding tool," Lyra repeated matter-of-factly. "I have observed it during your physical training sessions. It appears to alter in size under certain conditions. Is this a natural function?" Ethan's face turned a deep shade of red. He realized with horror that Lyra must have been referring to times when the humans exercised in the open-air gym near the outpost. The tight workout gear likely hadn't concealed certain physiological reactions that he had hoped no one noticed. That's not something we discuss openly," Ethan managed, his voice strained. "Why not?" Lyra asked, her expression one of genuine confusion. "It is a biological phenomenon, is it not? Should it not be studied and understood?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, trying to find a way to steer the conversation in a less mortifying direction. "It's a private matter," he said carefully. "Humans have social rules about these things. It's considered impolite to talk about. Personal anatomy like that." "Impolite." Lyra's brow furrowed. "But how can one learn if one does not ask questions?" Ethan sighed, realizing there was no easy way out of this conversation. "Look," he said, "it's complicated. Human biology is influenced by a lot of factors: physical, emotional, and environmental. What you observed is just a normal reaction, but it's not something we usually talk about." Liara seemed to ponder this for a moment, her eyes narrowing in thought. So it is a reaction. Fascinating. Does it serve a purpose, or is it merely decorative? Ethan nearly choked on his own breath. It's definitely not decorative, he said, trying to suppress a nervous laugh. It has a biological purpose, but it's not something I'm going to explain here and now. Liara tilted her head again, clearly unsatisfied, but too polite to press further. I see, she said finally. Thank you for answering my question, human Ethan. I apologize if I caused discomfort. It's fine, Ethan said, relieved that the interrogation seemed to be over. Just, maybe save those kinds of questions for your textbooks. Liara nodded solemnly, her luminous eyes gleaming with curiosity. You are a fascinating species, she said. I hope you will allow me to ask more questions in the future. Ethan forced a smile. Sure, he said. Just, maybe not about that. As Liara turned to leave, Ethan sank against the tree, letting out a long breath. Life on Zalora III was never boring, but he was beginning to wonder if he should start writing a manual for interspecies interactions. One thing was certain, working with the Lyrelians was going to be full of surprises. A cultural misunderstanding. The next morning, Ethan sat in the outpost's shared lounge, sipping a cup of synthetic coffee and trying to shake off the lingering awkwardness of his conversation with Liara. The Lyrelians were a curious species, yes, but Liara's directness had left him thoroughly unprepared. He scrolled through his research notes, hoping to immerse himself in work, when a familiar melodic voice interrupted his thoughts. Human Ethan, may I join you? He looked up to see Liara standing at the doorway, holding a small crystalline device that glowed faintly in her hands. Her wide eyes sparkled with the same relentless curiosity he had seen the day before. Sure, Liara, Ethan said with a sigh, gesturing to the chair opposite him. What's on your mind? Liara sat gracefully, her movements fluid and precise. I wish to apologize for any discomfort I caused during our previous discussion. It seems I miscalculated human cultural norms. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Miscalculated? Yes, Liara said earnestly. I have been studying human behavior through your data archives, but it seems there are nuances I have not yet grasped. Your species appears to place great emphasis on privacy, particularly regarding biological functions. Ethan nodded slowly, grateful for her self-awareness. That's right. Humans have a lot of unspoken rules about what's considered appropriate to talk about. Fascinating, Liara murmured, tapping her crystalline device. Our people share knowledge freely, especially about biology. It is seen as a communal responsibility to understand one another. Ethan leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. So you don't have any topics that are considered off-limits? Not in the way you describe, Liara replied. For us, understanding is survival. We are a species born from cooperation. Secrecy or withholding information is rare, and when it occurs, it is usually tied to an emotional wound. That's very different from humans, Ethan admitted. We value privacy, individuality, and personal space. It's part of how we evolved. Liara's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Your individuality intrigues me. It explains why humans are so diverse, even in appearance. Among my people, we share a single genetic pool. Variations are minimal. Ethan's scientific curiosity piqued. Wait, you're saying your entire species is genetically uniform? Yes, Liara confirmed. Our bodies are designed for efficiency, and our minds are wired for collective understanding. It is why we struggle to comprehend the complexities of your species. Humans seem unpredictable. Ethan chuckled. Unpredictable is a good word for us. But isn't it hard, being so similar? Don't you ever feel, I don't know, restricted? Liara tilted her head, considering his question. Restricted? No, but I do envy your freedom of expression. For example, your reactions yesterday, your discomfort, your humor, your embarrassment. They were all so alive. To us, such emotions are fascinating because they signify depth. Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity of her admiration. Well, I guess we humans are full of surprises. Liara's luminous eyes locked onto his. Indeed. That is why we seek to understand you. Your adaptability may hold the key to solving some of our greatest challenges. What kind of challenges? Ethan asked, his curiosity now fully engaged. Liara hesitated, her fingers twitching slightly. Our species is facing a decline, she admitted softly. Though our genetic uniformity has kept us strong for millennia, it now poses a risk. We cannot adapt to certain environmental changes as quickly as you can. Our population is dwindling. Ethan frowned. That sounds serious. What's being done to address it? Liara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. That is why your presence here is so important. Humans may hold the answers we need. Your genetic diversity, your adaptability, even your biological responses, such as those I inquired about yesterday, could provide insights. Ethan's heart sank as he realized the weight behind her curiosity. Wait, are you saying you're studying us to use our biology? Not use, Liara corrected, her tone earnest. Learn from. Adapt to. You must understand, Ethan, our curiosity is born from desperation, not exploitation. Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing her words. The Lyrellians' innocent demeanor masked a deep struggle for survival, one that made their curiosity about humans more understandable. Still, the ethical implications of such a study weighed heavily on his mind. I get it, Ethan said finally, but there's a line. Humans value consent and mutual understanding. If we're going to help, it has to be on equal terms. Liara nodded solemnly. That is why I approached you. I hope to learn more about your customs and limitations so that we may work together without causing harm. For the first time since their conversation began, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Well, he said, I guess we could start with a cultural exchange. You teach me about your people, and I'll do the same for you. But let's keep the questions less personal for now. Liara's lips curled into a small smile, a rare and subtle gesture for her species. Agreed. Let us build understanding, human Ethan. As they began discussing their respective cultures, Ethan found himself warming to the idea of collaboration. Liara's people might not understand boundaries yet, but their sincerity and determination were impossible to ignore. Perhaps, he thought, this unexpected partnership could lead to something greater than either of them imagined. The science exchange. Later that day, Ethan found himself standing in the Lyrelian Research Hub, surrounded by an audience of blue-skinned beings. The circular room hummed with energy, its walls lined with crystalline devices that pulsed with soft, rhythmic light. In the center of the room, a holographic display projected a rotating 3D model of the human body, complete with annotations that made Ethan squirm. So, this is what you've been working on? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Liara nodded, her silver hair catching the light. Yes, our observations of your kind have been compiled into this model. It is incomplete, of course, which is why your input is invaluable. Ethan scanned the room. The Lyrelians around him were focused, their luminous eyes fixed on the hologram. There was no malice in their expressions, only an intense curiosity that bordered on reverence. Still, the sight of his body, anatomically detailed and spinning in midair, made him deeply uncomfortable. Okay, Ethan said, taking a deep breath. Let's start with some ground rules. First, humans have something called personal boundaries. It means there are topics and actions we don't feel comfortable sharing, especially with strangers. A murmur rippled through the Lyrelians. One of them, an older male with a deep indigo hue, raised a hand. Why would knowledge be restricted? Is it not beneficial to share all information for the greater good? Ethan resisted the urge to groan. It's not about restricting knowledge. It's about respecting privacy. Some things are deeply personal, and discussing them can make people feel vulnerable. Liara stepped forward, her tone conciliatory. Perhaps we should focus on topics that align with Ethan's comfort level. Ethan, What would you like to explain first? Ethan glanced at the hologram and winced. He decided to steer the discussion toward safer territory. Let's talk about the human brain, he said, gesturing to the holographic head. It's one of the most complex organs in our body, and the reason we're so adaptable. The hologram zoomed in on the brain, displaying its intricate folds. Ethan began explaining its functions in simple terms, describing how the cerebral cortex managed higher-order thinking, while the amygdala regulated emotions. The Lyrellians listened intently, their crystalline devices capturing every word. This explains much, Lyra said thoughtfully. Your brain's structure allows for rapid decision-making and emotional depth. It is no wonder your species is so resilient. Ethan nodded, encouraged by their engagement. Exactly. Humans have a strong survival instinct, which is partly why we're able to adapt to almost any environment. It's also why we value individuality. Our brains are wired to think creatively and independently. Another Lyrellian, a young female with violet eyes, raised her hand. And what of the emotional responses we observed yesterday? Are they a product of this same adaptability? Ethan hesitated, realizing he couldn't avoid the topic entirely. Emotions are complex, he admitted. They're tied to both our biology and our experiences. For example, embarrassment, which I felt yesterday, is an emotional reaction that helps humans navigate social situations. It's our way of recognizing when we've crossed a boundary or made a mistake. The Lyrellians exchanged intrigued glances. Fascinating, the indigo-skinned elder said. Among our kind, emotions are shared through neural synchronization. Individual feelings are rare, as our minds are linked. Your species must experience a profound sense of isolation. Ethan paused, taken aback by the observation. I guess you could say that. Humans do feel lonely sometimes, but it's also what drives us to form deep personal connections. Our individuality allows us to forge relationships based on choice, not obligation. Lyra's gaze softened. Such connections must be precious. It is a perspective we lack, as our bonds are instinctual rather than chosen. The conversation took a lighter turn as Ethan explained human social structures, from friendships to families. The Lyrellians were particularly fascinated by the concept of romantic relationships, which they struggled to comprehend. So you choose a partner based on emotional compatibility? Lyra asked, her voice tinged with wonder. How do you determine if someone is suitable? It's complicated, Ethan said with a laugh. Humans look for shared values, mutual respect, and, well, chemistry. Chemistry. Lyra tilted her head. Do you mean a biological reaction? Sort of, Ethan replied. It's a mix of physical attraction and emotional connection. It's hard to explain, but when it happens, you just know. The Lyrellians appeared both baffled and intrigued. Ethan couldn't help but smile at their wide-eyed curiosity. Despite the initial awkwardness, he found himself enjoying the exchange. For the first time, he saw their questions not as invasive, but as a genuine attempt to bridge the gap between their worlds. As the discussion continued, Ethan noticed a shift in the room's atmosphere. The Lyrellians' questions became less clinical and more thoughtful, reflecting a growing understanding of human complexity. Lyra, in particular, seemed deeply moved by the concept of individuality and personal choice. Ethan, she said as the session concluded, your species is remarkable. Your ability to feel so deeply, to choose your own path, it is both alien and beautiful to us. Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. And your species is remarkable in its own way. You've built a society on cooperation and shared knowledge. Maybe we can learn from each other. Lyra nodded, her silver hair shimmering under the room's crystalline glow. Yes, Ethan. I believe we can. As Ethan left the research hub that evening, he couldn't shake the feeling that this collaboration was more than just a scientific exchange. It was the beginning of something greater. A chance to create a deeper understanding between two vastly different species. For the first time since arriving on Zalora II, he felt hopeful about the future. The revelation. The evening air on Zalora III carried a serene hum, a natural melody of the forest, blending with the faint whir of the outpost's generators. Ethan sat on the edge of the observation deck, staring at the stars and reflecting on the day's strange but enlightening events. He had barely begun to unwind when Lyra approached, her footsteps silent as always. "Human Ethan," she said softly. "May I sit with you?" Ethan glanced over his shoulder, surprised but not entirely displeased by her presence. "Sure, Lyra. What brings you out here?" She settled beside him, her silver hair catching the light of the twin moons. For a moment, she said nothing, her luminous eyes fixed on the horizon. Then, with an uncharacteristic hesitance, she spoke. "There is something I must tell you," she began. "Something I have not shared before." Ethan straightened, curiosity piqued by her tone. "What is it?" Lyra clasped her hands together, her fingers twitching nervously. "Do you recall our discussion about my people's declining population?" "Yeah," Ethan said, nodding. "You mentioned your genetic uniformity was making it harder for your species to adapt." Lyra sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "It is worse than I revealed. Our population has dwindled to less than half of what it was a century ago. Entire colonies have been lost to environmental shifts, diseases, and resource scarcity. Despite our technological advancements, we are unable to adapt quickly enough to survive." Ethan frowned, his heart sinking at the weight of her words. "I'm sorry to hear that. But what does that have to do with me?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Hope, fear, perhaps a mix of both. "Your species possesses what we lack: genetic diversity, your adaptability, your resilience. It is unlike anything we have encountered. We believe that by studying humans, we may find a way to save our kind." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "You're talking about using human genetics," he said slowly, "to create some kind of hybrid or cure." "Not precisely," Lyra said, shaking her head. "We do not wish to alter our species fundamentally. Rather, we hope to understand how your genetic diversity allows you to thrive in so many environments. Perhaps there is a way to replicate that adaptability without compromising who we are." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what he was hearing. "That's a lot to take in," he admitted. "But why tell me this now?" Lyra's gaze softened. "Because you deserve to know the truth. Your presence here is not a coincidence, Ethan. The research mission was organized with the hope that humans and Lyralians could work together, not just for knowledge, but for survival." Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. He had come to Zalora III, expecting to study plants and animals, not to become part of an interspecies effort to prevent extinction. The implications were staggering, both ethically and scientifically. "And what happens if we can't find a solution?" he asked quietly. "What happens to your people?" Lyra's shoulders slumped further. "Then we will fade, as so many species before us have. We are already at the brink. If this collaboration fails, it may be our last attempt." The weight of her words settled over Ethan like a heavy cloak. He thought of the Lyralians he had met, gentle, curious, and deeply committed to their communal way of life. The idea of their extinction felt unbearably tragic. "What do you need from me?" he asked finally. Lyra's expression brightened, her hope palpable. "Your knowledge, your insight. Help us understand the mechanisms behind human adaptability. Share your perspective, your experiences. With your help, we may find a way forward." Ethan nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. "Okay," he said. "I'll do what I can. But this has to be a two-way street. If we're going to work together, it has to be built on trust and mutual respect." Lyra smiled, a rare and beautiful expression. "Agreed. Your trust means more to us than you know." As the two of them sat beneath the twin moons, a fragile but profound partnership began to take shape. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, something that could change the fate of an entire species. Little did he know, The challenges ahead would test not only his scientific knowledge, but also his moral compass and his ability to navigate the complex and delicate dynamics of interspecies cooperation. You said, "Start with part 5 more unique and lengthy and give answer in chat." Chat you, he said. Part 5. Crossing the line. Ethan entered the research hub early the next morning, armed with a sense of determination and a strong cup of synthetic coffee. He had spent much of the night reflecting on his conversation with Lara, trying to balance his scientific curiosity with the ethical complexities of their situation. But as soon as he stepped into the crystalline chamber, he knew today would be different. The holographic human model had been replaced by something else, something deeply unsettling. Projected in the center of the room was a simulation of human interactions, complete with exaggerated depictions of emotional responses, and to Ethan's dismay, a series of scenarios that ventured uncomfortably close to personal matters. "Good morning, Ethan," Lara greeted, her voice bright and cheerful. "We've made significant progress in our study of human social dynamics." Ethan's eyes narrowed as he approached the hologram. "What is this?" he asked, his tone sharp. Lara tilted her head, her expression puzzled. "It is a recreation of human behavior based on our observations and data. We have used it to model various scenarios to better understand your species." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't just a study. This feels invasive. Some of these scenarios, they're private. How did you even get this information?" The surrounding Lyrelians exchanged uncertain glances, their luminous eyes flickering with unease. Finally, the elder male with the indigo hue stepped forward. "We apologize if we have overstepped, human Ethan," he said solemnly. "Our intention was not to offend but to learn. Your behavior is fascinating, and we believe that simulating it would allow us to grasp nuances we could not otherwise comprehend." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "I understand your intentions, but this crosses a line. Humans have boundaries for a reason. Some aspects of our lives are personal, and replicating them without consent violates our trust." Lara stepped closer, her voice tinged with regret. "Ethan, I did not realize this would upset you. Please, tell us how we can make amends." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to channel his frustration into something constructive. "First, you need to understand that humans value consent above all else. If you want to study us, you need to ask, clearly and directly. And second, you need to respect when we say no." The room fell silent as the Lyrelians absorbed his words. Finally, the elder nodded. "We hear you, Ethan. Your boundaries will be respected from this point forward." Lara's luminous eyes met his, filled with sincerity. "I am truly sorry for causing you discomfort. It was never my intention." Ethan's expression softened slightly. "I know, but trust is fragile, Lara. If we're going to work together, we need to build it carefully." Lara nodded, her silver hair shimmering in the crystalline light. "You are right. We must do better." To ease the tension, Ethan suggested shifting their focus to a less personal topic: human problem-solving and adaptability. He began explaining how humans approach challenges, using creativity and innovation to overcome obstacles. As he spoke, the Lyrelians' fascination reignited, their questions turning from invasive to insightful. "What drives humans to persist in the face of adversity?" Lara asked, her tone thoughtful. Ethan paused, considering his answer. "I think it's our instinct to survive, but also something more. Humans have a unique ability to hope, even when things seem impossible. It's what pushes us to keep trying, to find solutions even when the odds are against us." The indigo-skinned elder nodded slowly. "Hope, a powerful concept. Perhaps it is what sets your species apart." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe. But it's not just hope, it's also connection. Humans thrive when we work together, when we trust and support one another. That's something we can teach you, just like you can teach us about cooperation on a larger scale." As the session continued, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The earlier tension gave way to a sense of mutual understanding. The Lyralians began to see Ethan not just as a subject of study, but as a partner in their quest for survival. By the end of the day, Lyra approached Ethan with a small crystalline device. "This is for you," she said, holding it out. "It is a tool we use to share knowledge. I hope it will help you understand us better, as you have helped us understand you." Ethan accepted the device, his curiosity piqued. "Thanks, Lyra. I'll take a look." As he left the hub, Ethan felt a sense of cautious optimism. The Lyralians had crossed a line, but they had also shown a willingness to listen and learn. Perhaps, he thought, this partnership could still succeed if they could navigate the delicate balance between curiosity and respect. Little did he know, the next challenge would test that balance in ways he could never have anticipated. The deeper connection. The following weeks marked a turning point in Ethan's relationship with the Lyralians. Their curiosity about humans became more measured, their questions more thoughtful, and their interactions less invasive. Lyra, in particular, seemed determined to bridge the cultural gap. She often sought Ethan out for conversations that went beyond biology, delving into philosophy, art, and the human experience. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Lyra invited Ethan to a Lyralian gathering, a rare and intimate event where her people shared knowledge and experiences through a unique form of storytelling. Curious and eager to understand their culture better, Ethan agreed. The gathering took place in a crystalline chamber that shimmered with an ethereal light. Dozens of Lyralians sat in a loose circle, their luminous eyes reflecting the glow of the room. In the center stood a large, translucent orb, pulsating gently with a soft, rhythmic hum. "What's that?" Ethan whispered to Lyra as they took their places. "It is the memory sphere," she explained. "It allows us to share our thoughts and emotions collectively. Through it, we can experience each other's stories as if they were our own." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You mean you can actually feel what someone else felt, like firsthand?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. It is how we preserve our history and strengthen our bonds. Tonight, we hope you will share a story of your own." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Share a story? I didn't prepare anything." Lyra smiled softly. "It does not need to be rehearsed. Speak from your heart. Share something that defines you." As the gathering began, one by one, the Lyralians stepped forward to touch the memory sphere, their stories unfolding in waves of light and sound. Ethan watched in awe, as the room was filled with vivid imagery, scenes of triumph, sorrow, and unity. Each story was deeply personal yet shared with a collective grace that left him humbled. When it was Ethan's turn, he hesitated, feeling the weight of expectation. Lyra gave him an encouraging nod, her luminous eyes steady and warm. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward and placed his hand on the sphere. It was cool to the touch, and almost immediately, he felt a gentle pulse beneath his fingertips, as if it were alive. "I don't know if this will work," he began, his voice echoing softly in the chamber. "But I'll give it a shot." He closed his eyes and let his mind drift to a memory that had shaped him, a memory of his childhood, hiking in the rugged mountains of Earth with his father. He spoke of the challenges they faced on the trail, the blisters and exhaustion, and the moment they reached the summit. He described the breathtaking view, the endless sky, and the overwhelming sense of accomplishment that made every hardship worthwhile. As he spoke, the memory sphere responded, projecting his emotions into the room. The Lyralians gasped as they felt the biting wind of the mountain, the ache of tired muscles, and the euphoria of standing on the edge of the world. For the first time, they experienced the raw, unfiltered essence of human determination and wonder. When Ethan finished, the chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, the Lyralians began to hum, a soft, harmonious sound that resonated with gratitude and respect. Lyra stepped forward, her expression radiant. "Ethan," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "your story. It is beautiful. It is a testament to the strength of your kind." Ethan smiled, a mix of pride and humility. Thanks, Lyra. I guess it's just a small glimpse of what makes us human. The gathering continued late into the night, with the Lyralians sharing more of their stories and inviting Ethan to ask questions. He learned about their deep connection to nature, their reliance on collective memory, and their struggles to preserve their way of life in the face of decline. For the first time, he saw them not just as subjects of study, but as individuals with dreams, fears, and hopes. As the gathering came to an end, Lyra walked Ethan back to the outpost. The night air was cool, and the forest hummed with life. "Thank you for sharing your story," Lyra said, her tone sincere. "It has given us a new understanding of what it means to be human." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "And thank you for letting me be part of tonight. It's clear how much your people value connection. I think we have more in common than I realized." Lyra smiled, her silver hair glinting in the moonlight. "Perhaps our differences are not barriers, but bridges." As they reached the outpost, Ethan paused, turning to face her. "Lyra, I know your people are counting on this collaboration to help them survive. I can't promise we'll find all the answers, but I'll do everything I can to help." Lyra placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but firm. "And we will do the same for you, Ethan. Together, we may find a way forward." For the first time since arriving on Zalora II, Ethan felt a deep sense of connection, not just with Lyra, but with an entire species. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, he believed it was a road worth traveling. Together, they were building something new, a partnership built on trust, understanding, and the shared hope of a brighter future. A new understanding. The morning sun bathed the outpost in golden light, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. Ethan stood on the observation deck, sipping his synthetic coffee and gazing at the horizon. The events of the past few weeks had been transformative, not just for the Lyralians, but for himself. He had come to Zalora II as a researcher, expecting to study an alien world from a detached, clinical perspective. Now he found himself deeply invested in the survival of a species that had become more than just a subject of study. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft hum of approaching footsteps. Turning, he saw Lyra walking toward him, a small crystalline device glowing faintly in her hands. "Good morning, human Ethan," she greeted, her voice warm and melodic. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all," Ethan said, smiling. "What's on your mind?" Lyra held up the device, her expression both excited and nervous. "This contains the culmination of our research so far. It is a model, a hypothesis for how our species might adapt using what we have learned from you." Ethan set his coffee down and took the device from her, his curiosity piqued. The crystalline surface shimmered as he activated it, revealing a 3D holographic projection of Lyralian and human DNA strands intertwining in a delicate, intricate dance. "This is incredible," Ethan said, his voice filled with awe. "You've managed to map out a way to incorporate genetic diversity without altering your species' core identity." Lyra nodded, her silver hair catching the light. "It is only a theoretical model, but it represents hope, a way for us to survive without losing what makes us who we are." Ethan studied the projection, his scientific mind racing with possibilities. "This could work," he said, more to himself than to Lyra. "But it's going to take time, years of testing and refinement." "We understand," Lyra said softly, "and we are prepared to be patient. For us, survival is not about rushing. It is about ensuring that what we preserve is worth saving." Ethan looked at her, admiration shining in his eyes. "You've taught me so much, Lyra, about your people, your culture, even about myself. This partnership has been more than just a scientific collaboration. It's been a lesson in understanding." Lyra's luminous eyes met his, filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. "And you have taught us, Ethan. You have shown us the strength of individuality, the power of hope, and the beauty of choice. These are gifts we will treasure always." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the elder Lyrilian, his indigo skin glowing faintly in the sunlight. "Human Ethan," he said, his tone solemn, "we wish to honor you." "Honor me?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Why?" The elder gestured for Ethan to follow. Lyra walked beside him as they made their way to the central plaza of the Lyrilian settlement. There, hundreds of Lyrilians had gathered, their luminous forms creating a sea of shimmering light. In the center of the plaza stood the memory sphere, its gentle hum resonating through the air. "What's going on?" Ethan whispered to Lyra. "This is a rare ceremony," she explained. "It is called the Bonding of Worlds. It signifies the creation of a partnership that transcends cultural and biological boundaries." The elder stepped forward, addressing the crowd in the Lyrilian tongue. His words flowed like music, rich with emotion and meaning. Lyra translated for Ethan in a soft voice. "He is thanking you, Ethan, for your willingness to share, to teach, and to understand. He is acknowledging the risks you have taken and the trust you have shown." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat as the elder motioned for him to step forward. The memory sphere glowed brighter, its hum intensifying. Ethan placed his hand on its surface, and immediately his mind was filled with a cascade of images and emotions, moments from his time on Zalora II, interwoven with the collective memories of the Lyrilians. He saw their struggles, their hopes, their fears. He felt their gratitude and their determination to survive. And he realized, in that moment, that he had become a part of something much greater than himself. As the ceremony concluded, Lyra stepped forward, holding a small, intricately carved pendant. "This is a symbol of our bond," she said, placing it in Ethan's hand. "It represents the unity of our worlds and the hope we share for the future." Ethan closed his fingers around the pendant, his heart full. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." As the crowd began to disperse, Lyra turned to Ethan, her eyes shining. "This is only the beginning," she said. "There is much work to be done, but together we can build a future where both our species thrive." Ethan nodded, a sense of purpose surging through him. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Together, he and the Lyrilians would chart a new course, one built on trust, understanding, and the unbreakable bond between two worlds.